The most dangerous piece of financial advice you've ever received didn't come from a con artist or a shady investment scheme. It came from a best-selling book, a motivational speaker on a stage, and probably your favorite podcast. And here's the part that should make you genuinely furious. It's been neurologically wiring you to stay broke while simultaneously convincing you that the only thing standing between you and wealth is your attitude. You know the routine. You find a new book, a new creator, a new framework that talks about abundance, about manifesting wealth, about shifting your identity to that of a financially free person. And it works. Kind of. For a few days, maybe a week, you feel different. Something feels like it finally clicked. You visualize the house, the account balance, the freedom. You write it in your journal. You say it out loud. You believe it, genuinely, for a little while. And then nothing changes. The account balance stays exactly where it was. The paycheck feels exactly as insufficient as it did before. And instead of questioning the method, you question yourself. Maybe you didn't believe hard enough. Maybe there's some deep subconscious resistance blocking your abundance. Maybe you're just not the kind of person who gets to have financial freedom. This cycle, the surge of inspiration followed by the plateau of nothing, followed by self-blame, isn't a character flaw. It's not proof that you're broken or too damaged or not cut out for wealth. It's a predictable, measurable neurological response. And the self-help finance industry has been accidentally triggering it in millions of people for decades. Understanding it is where the wealth mindset myth actually gets debunked, not by cynicism, but by neuroscience. Here's what's actually happening inside your brain when you consume wealth mindset content. And this is where it gets both fascinating and a little infuriating. Your brain has a reward system built around a neurotransmitter called dopamine. But here's what most people get completely wrong about dopamine. It's not the pleasure chemical. That's a myth that popular science repeated so many times it became assumed truth. Neuroscientist Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan spent years proving that dopamine is actually the wanting chemical. It fires in anticipation of a reward, not during the reward itself. The moment you vividly imagine a future outcome, a paid-off debt, a full savings account, the version of your life where money isn't a source of dread, your dopamine system activates as if part of that goal has already been achieved. Now, this sounds useful. Motivation, right? Except there's a catch that changes everything. In a landmark series of studies, psychologist Gabriele Oettingen at New York University tested positive visualization across multiple domains: weight loss, academic performance, career advancement, and financial goals. What she consistently found was that people who engaged in pure positive fantasy about achieving their goals actually performed worse than people who didn't visualize at all. Not a little worse. Measurably, significantly worse. The subjects who spent the most time vividly imagining their successful future outcomes had lower energy, lower rates of follow-through, and took fewer concrete steps toward their goals than the control groups. Why? Because the dopamine hit from imagining success partially satisfies the brain's drive to actually pursue it. The visualization triggers the reward before the work happens, which neurologically reduces the urgency to do the work. Your brain registers a version of mission accomplished before the mission has even started. This mechanism has a name in behavioral neuroscience. It's called mental simulation substitution. When the simulated experience of success is vivid enough, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, delayed gratification, and long-term decision-making, receives a dampened signal to act. The fire that should drive behavior gets quietly extinguished by the fantasy of already having crossed the finish line. And Taylor Sharot, a neuroscientist at University College London and author of The Optimism Bias, showed through brain imaging that optimistic predictions literally suppress activity in the regions associated with threat detection and real-world risk assessment. Which means that when you are at your most wealth mindset activated, your most positive, your most visionary, you're most convinced that this is your year, your brain is simultaneously at its least equipped to accurately evaluate financial risk, identify the real obstacles in front of you, or make the grounded, specific decisions that actually build lasting wealth. This isn't wealth mindset pseudoscience as an insult. It's a clinical description of what the peer-reviewed data shows. The positive thinking framework, exactly as it's been sold to you, isn't just ineffective. In its pure form, it is neurologically working against your financial interests. So what does this actually look like in your bank account? Because this isn't abstract. This plays out in your financial life in ways that are very specific, very real, and, once you see them, very recognizable. Think about the last time you felt genuinely fired up about a financial goal. Maybe you watched a video, finished a chapter, left a seminar. That evening, or that weekend, you felt unstoppable. You were going to start the investment account. You were going to negotiate that raise. You were going to finally, seriously deal with the debt. It felt real this time. And then Tuesday arrived, and you hadn't done any of it. That's not laziness. That's dopamine debt. The spike of anticipatory reward that fired during the positive visualization left your baseline motivation lower than it was before. Your brain consumed the reward without delivering the action, and now actually doing the work requires more effort than it did before you got excited. Broke despite a positive mindset isn't a mystery. It's a documented neurological outcome, and it scales. People who report the highest consumption of wealth mindset content, the books, the summits, the manifestation money content, consistently show what behavioral economists call the intention-action gap at larger rates than those who focus on specific financial behaviors. They intend more. They execute less. Studies tracking financial decision-making show that individuals high in dispositional optimism were statistically less likely to maintain emergency funds, more likely to carry high-interest debt, and significantly more prone to overestimating future income when making spending decisions today. Think about what that means in real numbers. If you overestimate next year's income by just 15%, a completely ordinary optimism bias, and make even modest spending decisions based on that projection, you could end the year with $3,000 to $5,000 less in net savings than you planned. Compounded over a decade, the wealth mindset content you've consumed might be costing you more than a bad financial advisor. That's the behavioral finance truth nobody in the motivation space will say out loud, because the entire business model depends on selling the feeling of transformation, not the transformation itself. So what do you actually do with this? Because the answer is not pessimism. It's not giving up on aspiration or deciding your financial situation is fixed. The science doesn't say positive thinking is wrong. It says positive thinking alone is neurologically incomplete. And that distinction is everything, because it opens up 3 specific shifts that use the same brain circuitry, but in a way that drives real behavior instead of replacing it. The first shift draws directly from Erdingen's own research. She developed an antidote to pure fantasy, and it's called mental contrasting. The structured form is called WOOP, wish, outcome, obstacle, plan, but the neurological mechanism is simple and immediate. You don't just imagine the success. You immediately follow that vision with a vivid, honest image of the most realistic obstacle standing between you and that outcome. Not to scare yourself out of trying, to activate your brain's problem-solving circuits instead of its reward circuits. In real financial terms, this might look like you imagine the funded investment account, and then you immediately imagine the exact moment, next Friday, when you're about to transfer the money and your brain quietly suggests you wait until next month when things are less tight. That obstacle image is what keeps the dopamine system honest. Call this one the reality bridge. It's how you keep your vision connected to the ground beneath your feet. The second shift is what behavioral psychologists call an implementation intention, and the research on it is genuinely dramatic. Instead of deciding to do something, you decide exactly when, where, and how you will do it, in advance, in writing, in specific terms. Studies show that forming a detailed implementation intention increases follow-through on financial tasks by up to 300%. Not because of willpower, because you've given your prefrontal cortex a concrete script, which eliminates the cognitive friction that lets avoidance win. I will transfer $50 to my investment account every Friday at 9 a.m. from my desk before I open email is neurologically more powerful than I'm going to start investing this year. The feeling of intending to do something is no longer enough. Your brain needs a where and a when to treat it as real. Call this the action anchor. It's the difference between a resolution and an instruction. The third shift is about retraining where your dopamine fires, not eliminating it. Instead of letting the chemical reward fire during the visualization of the outcome, you train your brain to release it during the behavior itself. This means building what habit researchers call a microcelebration, a brief, deliberate moment of acknowledgement immediately after the financial action, not after the result. You transferred the $50. Good. You stop for 3 seconds. You notice it happened. That tiny loop begins to rewire the reward pathway so the action, not the vision, carries the dopamine signal. Call this the reward redirect, because you're not giving up the feeling of progress, you're just moving it to where it can actually do something with your life. So let's go back to where we started. The most dangerous financial advice you've ever received came from someone who genuinely wanted to help you, and that's what makes it so complicated and so worth understanding. The wealth mindset movement wasn't built on deception. It was built on a deep and sincere misunderstanding of how the brain's reward system actually works. A misunderstanding that the neuroscience has quietly, clearly corrected in published research that never made it onto the bestseller lists because it doesn't feel as good as the alternative. The lie isn't that your mindset matters. It does. The lie is that feeling wealthy is the same as building wealth. Your brain cannot tell the difference between vividly imagining financial freedom and actually taking a step toward it, and an entire industry has been exploiting that confusion, mostly without knowing it, for 30 years. When you strip away the performance of transformation and look at the actual science of getting rich, what you find isn't inspiration. It's a set of specific, learnable, neurologically grounded behaviors that your brain can be trained to execute consistently. Your mindset isn't the problem. Your dopamine was just spending your money before you had the chance to. I want to hear something specific from you. Have you ever experienced that motivational high from wealth mindset content, felt certain that this time something was genuinely different, and then watched the whole thing evaporate without a single real financial action happening? Tell me exactly what that pattern looked like for you. Not the general version, the specific one. Because the more precisely you can name it, the sooner you'll catch your dopamine system making purchases you didn't authorize.